she was like, ugh. So first of all, you want to leave your job, the money we have coming in. And second, you want to take me out to a different country with our child.
Welcome to the FI Show, where you get a behind-the-scenes look into financial independence. Here's your host, Cody and Justin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the FI Show. First things first, let's check in with the co-host, Cody. What's going on, man?
Hey, Justin, what's going on? It's been a wintry season up here in Massachusetts. We got 15 or 16 inches of snow on this past Wednesday, but I spun that to my advantage, and me and my girlfriend Lauren actually went up to Stratton, Vermont this past weekend. The conditions were perfect. It was all fresh powder. It actually started snowing while we were there, so I cannot complain about my first snowboarding session of the year. How about you, man?
Well, first of all, I'm a little jealous of that. And if anyone has done much Northeast skiing, you know that like fresh powder is not something you get that often. It's a lot of ice skating out there if you're skiing or snowboarding. So definitely very jealous of that. For me, we're down in Mississippi with some of the family for Christmas. I'm normally like super into Christmas, like with the presents and like being surprised. But this year we have a very small place. And so we didn't want to just be getting random presents. But we did really want to get into stand-up paddleboarding, a little bit different environment down in Austin, Texas, as far as the length of the year in which it's warm enough to do something like that. So very interested in getting started into that. And actually, we have plans to stop at this awesome-looking location. If you want to go look it up, it's called Caddo Lake State Park, CADDO. It's right on the Texas-Louisiana border. So you can just imagine all these big cypress trees and kind of a swamp-type environment. But we're going to try to do a little paddleboarding on the way home. So a little crazy to think about being on the water in December after living up in Boston, but I'm very excited about it. And before we preview the guest for today, let's take a quick moment for our partner.
Keeping track of your net worth is one of the most important things you can do on your journey to financial independence. If you don't have an idea of what your net worth is, there's no way that you can keep your quote-unquote score. One of our favorite tools to keep this score is called Personal Capital. If you haven't already started using it, it's an online software that basically compiles all of your data, it crunches all your assets, all your liabilities, and spits out a net worth number and allows you to track it day by day, month by month.
Yeah, Cody, one of the big things that hold people back when they're doing activities like tracking their expenses or tracking their net worth is just they look at it as a big burden. And this allows you to go in with one username and one password and access as many financial accounts as you have. These can be loans, these can be 401ks, these can be HSAs, bank accounts, credit cards. They're all linked there. The other thing I really like about Personal Capital is it's very investing focused. So you can go in there and look at your allocation across your entire portfolio. So you don't just look at your allocation in one type of account, but your allocation as a person completely. And if you want to use the same tool that me and Cody use to track our net worth, which is completely free, you can do so at thefishow.com/PC. That's thefishow.com/PC.
So sticking with the nomadic theme we had with Mr. Nomad Numbers from last week, this week we have Jim White from Route to Retire. And Jim kind of had the cookie cutter corporate job. He was kind of pedaling along, saving a lot of money along the way. Eventually he discovers financial independence, which leads into his interest in traveling and travel hacking and just kind of optimizing his expenses in cool and different ways. So he starts doing some research, figures out many hours and weeks of research, but figures out that Panama is a place where him and his wife might want to stay and spend the rest of their days, or at least a good chunk of them. And so they do a little, mini tour down there and they love it. And so actually since 2018, Jim and his wife and his daughter, they have been living the expat life.
Yeah, and obviously Jim has done a great thing, and I think it's always sounds intriguing to people to get to do something like living abroad, but I have to give Jim a lot of credit for the way he went about it. He went about it in a more conservative fashion. They actually saved enough money to where they could retire in the United States if they wanted to. So, they didn't go into it thinking, this will absolutely 100% work, no questions asked, and went in blindly. They went down, did a test run, set up lots of conversations with people to make sure that this was going to be the place for them, and always had a fallback plan. Obviously, all of that information and a whole lot more will be available through some of the links that we'll leave in the show notes, which you can find at thefishow.com/Jim. That's thefishow.com/JIM. And now enough of the preview. It's time to let Jim shine. Take it away, Jim.
I actually kind of had two epiphanies on personal finances. The first was long time ago when I was just starting to date my now wife at the time. It was probably about the year, I'd say 90, 99, 90, yeah, about 99. And around that time, I started getting into Robert Kiyosaki and all that kind of stuff. And I started learning. I actually met him, which was kind of cool. But I started getting into the whole idea, hey, I need to start doing things. I need to get away from this 9 to 5 type of job and look at real estate and different options like that. So that's exactly what I did. I bought a house in 2003. It was the first house I had ever owned. And the game plan was, let's buy this house and fix it up, rent it out. Life will be good. Then my fiance moved in with me, and we quickly learned that I didn't know how to fix anything. I'm not good at fixing anything. So that turned out to be a pretty big hurdle. But long story short, I didn't even understand the numbers real well. I didn't do much, but I dove in. I took a shot at it. And we actually ended up just selling that a few years ago. So it didn't go that great, but we got lucky. We had some tenants that had stayed in there pretty much from when we started renting it out for almost 10 years. So that was really good. But they wrecked the place, and then we ended up selling it. It was so that was my first time. And in my head, it was all about, you got to be rich. It's all about wealth. It's all about money. The only way you can do anything is if you have millions of dollars and everything. But later on down the line, then I had my daughter in 2010, and I took off of work for a week and spent time with her. And I mean, I was just, I head over heels. I didn't know what to do. I didn't understand. I had to go back to work and not be with my daughter. I couldn't comprehend that. It didn't feel right. And so I was pretty bummed, and that took a long time, but probably a couple of years, 2-3 years after that is when I ran into Joe Udo's blog, Retire by 40. Most everybody says Mr. Money Mustache, but I didn't find him till years later. And once I had learned, wow, it's actually possible to retire without being a gazillionaire. And this guy's in the same path as me. He's an IT guy. He's retired before 40, has a kid. I mean, this is insane. And it was at that point I talked to my wife and said, we're going to make some changes. And we were already saving pretty well, but we really got on the path, really started pushing things further on down. We ended up buying a duplex as another rental property and just kept pushing money away and, cutting back on different expenses. And that's it. Here we are.
Well, since your first kind of path, which was that real estate path, didn't go quite as well as you had hoped it would, what did that conversation go like with your wife when you said, hey, I've got another plan now, you're going to love this one?
Well, lucky for me, we hadn't gone back into that property again. Remember, we had those tenants in there. So they were still in there when we bought that property. So at the time, we weren't killing it, but they were paying the mortgage down. And so we were gaining some sort of appreciation, and we were making just a little bit on it. So when we looked at this duplex, I was very lucky because I have a good friend of mine who owns quite a bit of real estate. And he actually went with me and walked through the place, and it was rent ready. I mean, this thing, now I understood the numbers. We were good to go. This is 12 years later. And so we did well with this duplex.
So I know once you kind of got into what you call like your second aha moment of, personal finance, financial independence, whatever you want to call it, you went to your wife and you said, hey, we got to make some changes. What type of stuff were you thinking about changing? Like, were you starting to, get the lifestyle creep, buying extravagant things, all that? Or, what were those changes on a tactical level?
So I guess we're both pretty lucky that we have each other, that we're both pretty naturally frugal. So it wasn't like we were, making it rain, throwing money everywhere. But at the same time, we had I think it was a 2,400 square foot house that we moved into. And at the time it was just the two of us. And then eventually 2010, we had my daughter, but that's too much house. We didn't need this, this good a house or this big a house in it was in a nice neighborhood. And up until then, we had always bought new cars and everything. And finally we said, we don't need them. I mean, it just gets us from point A to point B. And I'm not hitting on anybody that is all about the cars. I mean, if that's your passion, do it. Just cut back on all the other crap that's out there. So at that point, we just kept riding out our cars. The plan was just ride them into the ground and go from there. So she was pretty on board. Everybody was pretty good with it.
And when you were first looking at going down this path, were you thinking that you would continue to live in the United States, or did you already have your mind kind of looking at international spots, that geoarbitrage mindset?
Ooh, I like that question. That's good. So when what happens is when you start getting further on down the path, you eventually get everything automated, and there's nothing better than getting it just done for you. Like, so I had, the 401k is an easy one, but my paycheck would get deposited and the money would automatically come out. Some would move to savings, some would move to Roth IRA, every HSA, everything became automated and I didn't do anything. So then it just becomes a waiting game. And that is probably the worst part of the path to FI. It's just because it drags on and there's nothing else you can do. You've cut out, your expenses, you've done everything you could, and now you just wait and wait and wait. And for some people, that's not too bad. If you have a job you love, great. But if you are at a job where you're not happy, which was where I was at, then your mind starts to wander. And at that point, I finally had the idea. I said, well, what if we moved to a different, a lower cost of living place? And initially it was looking at different states, but we were in Ohio, which is already a pretty low cost place. But, and then eventually I came up with the idea of going out of the country. Why limit ourselves? And so after looking at different things, we came up with Panama. And I think my wife was probably pretty, I don't want to say against the idea, but she was like, ugh. So first of all, you want to leave your job, the money we have coming in. And second, you want to take me out to a different country with our child. So that was a little hard to swallow, but she liked the idea. She likes to say, hey, anything for a free vacation. Shouldn't we check out the place first? So we came down here in 2017 and scoped it out, and I didn't say a word. Happy wife, happy life. So we got back and I just waited, and she finally said, I could do that. I think we could live in Panama. We can give this a shot. And so, just real quick, one important thing was she brought up an excellent point. My initial idea was, if the cost of living is so much lower, that makes our FI number lower that we need to achieve. So if we move down, like I can quit my job earlier. But then we realized, she realized, she brought up the point and said, if we move down there and we hate it, now we have to make a choice. We either have to stay in this place that we hate, or we move back and you have to go back to work. And I don't know why I had to go back to work. Why wouldn't she have to go back to it? That's not fair. But no. So I ended up working long enough that we could afford the U.S., not as freely as living in Panama, but I kept working to save up enough for it.
So you say Panama almost like, this magic thing went off in your head, but there's so many other places that are low cost of living. I mean, what drew you to Panama? Was it computer research? Did you have a friend who lived there? I'm just curious what the draw was for Panama specifically.
No, I did not have a friend here. I need to get some friends. No, I have this tendency where I like to over research everything. I spend hours and hours, days and anything. If I want to buy a new cell phone, oh my gosh, that's a whole project in itself. So this was a big deal. And I just kept digging and digging, and we had a couple places, but Panama just kept drawing us back because it seemed like a simpler step. It wasn't, we had never lived abroad before, but it seemed like it would just be a little easier. They use the US dollar here. We're in an expat community, so the expats speak English, the majority of them. And a lot of the Panamanians are we're pretty well received here, I guess you can say, and everything. So it just seemed a little easier. It's not that far to fly. I mean, it was a 3-hour flight to Miami and then another 3-hour flight to Panama. So it wasn't the end of the world. And we said, let's just take it 1 year at a time and see what happens. So
it sounds like you do, like you said, a ton of research, which is obviously really critical when you're picking out these places and making these plans. What is some of the way you did research before the move? And then when you looked at that, what's something that now you can retroactively kind of look at and say, I totally missed this whole category?
Well, I think we got pretty lucky with what we chose. I'm very happy living here. But I would say, I mean, I just started Googling, and then, one thing would take you to another. And then eventually you find people who live here and whatnot. But I mean, it was really just a lot of research. The problem is there's popular magazines. I don't want to say their name, but they focus on how you live internationally. And so those type of things where they just tell you the good points and they don't tell you the bad points. And my goal is always to see the worst in everything ahead of time, plan for the worst and, make the best of it. And so we weren't seeing a lot of negatives here in Panama. And then eventually I found a lady named Jackie Lang. She moved from Texas to Panama in 2010, I believe. And she had friends that came down and she would show them around. And then eventually she had other friends that were like, hey, this would be neat. Can you show me around? Anyway, she built this into a business where she now does relocation tours. And the reason that was a big deal is because she was doing Q&A conference calls every month. And so what I would do is I would listen to these conference calls. I'd ask questions, and they'd be like an hour long, and you could just ask her anything, and she would be straight up with you. There was no BS. It wasn't hey, everything's a bowl of cherries here. It wasn't that. It was, here's the good, here's the bad, here's the ugly, here's what you'll hate, here's what you'll love. And I mean, by the time we were ready to plunge, we felt confident that we were moving to a place we understood the pros and the cons and would enjoy.
So, Jim, you're an analytical guy. You're an IT guy. You are a research-heavy guy, like you mentioned, and this is a financial independence podcast. Could we maybe kind of dig into the cost breakdown a little bit? Because like you mentioned before, you were living in Ohio, which is already a low cost of living state in the United States. But could we kind of maybe draw parallels between what you were paying for things in Ohio and now in Panama? Maybe we can take it category by category, the big three, and then however you want to mix it up.
Sure. So the tough thing is when you're planning to move to another country, like you have no idea what your spending is going to be. I mean, you can kind of guess on things, but you don't know till you get there. There's people here that I've seen that are spending $400 on a place per month, and some that are spending thousands of dollars on a place. So we didn't know, like those kind of things. We didn't know. We knew groceries might be cheaper, they might not be. There was a lot of detail that made it hard to plan for. So we did anticipate. My guess was that we were going to spend about $35,000 a year here, and we overshot that. I could tell you this year was a little different. As everybody knows, 2020 was a year of fun. So let's not look too deep into that. But that added some other costs. But based on the normal months here, I think we were looking to spend about $42,000 a year. And so I'd say between 42 and 45 would probably be about our normal cost. And we are not wanting for anything. And we're spending a lot more than a lot of people here. So, and don't forget, that's three of us, not just me and my wife. We also have my daughter here too. But yeah, if we want to break some things down, I can give you the cost of our condo. We're living in a gated community here. And again, this was one of those, we want to take it a little bit at a time. So before we just jump into, living in a place with all the locals that speak Spanish, let's start a little bit slow. And then this had a bunch of amenities like swimming pool, racquetball courts, hot tub, things like that we can enjoy, full gym. So our condo is $1,100 a month, and that includes almost all utilities. We're paying a little bit for the resort fee now. That's a whole different story. But But all in all, I'd say for housing, utilities, maybe $1,200 a month.
Not bad.
Yeah, and our house, it depends what you want to compare it to, but our house living in Ohio was I was paying about $2,000 for taxes, insurance, principal, the whole thing. Minus that doesn't even count utilities and all that kind of stuff. So that was a big savings there. Groceries was a little bit of a change for us. I think we anticipated everything being cheaper here on food, and it's not. You can get fresh pineapples for 50 cents, and that's fantastic. Right off of a pickup truck. Try buying stuff off the back of a pickup truck in the U.S. That's a little scarier, but here that's common. And so fresh food, fruits, veggies, all that kind of stuff are real cheap here, and you can do well with that. But what's a good example? You want a jar of pickles, it's going to be like $6 for a jar of pickles and stuff. Butter is expensive, different things like that you just wouldn't expect. And like I said, we're pretty frugal. So when we were in the Cleveland area, we were spending a lot less because we were shopping at Aldi and Walmart, and that was it. So our grocery costs went up a little bit more. Plus, we're going out to eat more too, because why not? We're retired and it's time to enjoy it a little bit. So, and then your third factor that we're talking about would be transportation. And when we came here, we sold everything we had. We kept like a tiny 8-foot by 8-foot storage unit, but we sold everything else. Gave away. It's all gone. Everything's furnished down here. So I forgot to mention that with the housing. So that's included in our rent too, we didn't have to buy couches or beds or anything, or utensils. Came with everything. But so yeah, that third factor is transportation. And we had sold our cars off before we moved here. And when we got here, the plan was we purposely moved to an area, it's Boquete, Panama, and it's a walkable town. It's a smaller town. Everything's walkable. And that was one of the other reasons we chose the condo where we're living, is because it's a half-mile walk to town. And mind you, it's important to know it's 75 degrees here pretty much every single day. So we decided purposely not to get a car when we got here. Cabs are dirt cheap. It was, if we go get groceries and want to take a cab back, it'll run like a buck or two. Or if we want to go down to the big city of David, which is about an hour drive, we'll take the bus. It's $1.75 and things like that. So we're doing pretty well without a car. So obviously our transportation costs have dropped to next to nothing as well. Once in a while we'll rent a car, take it to the beach or something like that. Or people our next door neighbor. I'm doing this from my neighbor's apartment right now. She's out of town for the month, and she goes, "Just use my car if you want it." Just fantastic. Everybody's so nice, so we take advantage of that. We're making a beach trip in a few weeks here, and yeah. So there you go. So the costs are, for what we're getting, it would be a lot more expensive in the U.S. And that would be just Ohio. I can only imagine more expensive places like a California or New York or something like that. So
this has been great, kind of going through all those categories that you definitely have to plan for, like those, like you said, the big three. But as you also mentioned, this year has not been a typical year, and you had to kind of make an escape back to the U.S. And I'm curious, as part of your planning, did you have sort of an escape plan ready? And whether you did or did not, do you have any recommendations for people if they're thinking about living abroad, the things that they need to consider and think through in the event that they need to kind of jump ship and come back to the United States?
So like I said, it's not horrible getting in and out of here, which is kind of nice. And we're in the same time zone and all that kind of stuff. Our game plan was to stay here. And even when the pandemic hit, we were a little concerned at the beginning, but not a lot. And we decided let's ride it out. That was our plan. And, when we started seeing this a little more and more in the beginning of March, and then April rolled around, and they started going pretty draconian here. I mean, they locked everything down. We just weren't even able to leave our condo at all. And what would happen is men could go out on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays for 2 hours based on the last digit of your passport to the grocery store, banks, or pharmacies. And women on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So you couldn't go out together, and no kids. So our daughter, imagine having a 10-year-old, well, she was 9 at the time, being stuck inside I'd say it's probably about a 1,500 square foot apartment for months at a time. Couldn't go out to play, couldn't do anything. So that was a little tough. It got pretty rough here. And at one point then we finally decided, okay, it's time. We gotta, let's get out of here. Let's bail and we'll regroup later. And it was probably a bad move. They had a lot less cases here than they did in the US, but the concern was family and friends. That's always the concern, isn't it? Man, they ruin everything. No, because what happened? So then you start thinking, and you go, God. So what would happen? What would happen if mom or dad gets sick and goes to the hospital? We can't get to them. What if somebody dies? What if this and that? What if we get it here? We know the hospitals are very good here, but we don't know the rules. This is all new to everybody. What if Faith gets sick? Will they let us be at the hospital with her here? We've been learning Spanish, but not enough that we could talk to them. So there was a lot of worry. And finally, we decided at the end of June, we said, okay, it's time. We don't know if we'll be able to get back. The borders were closed, but they were running humanitarian flights. And at the time, I didn't know much about what that actually meant, but it actually worked pretty easy. We just booked a flight. The problem is the big airport here is about 8 hours away, 6 to 8 hours away. If you're driving, there's a small airport here. And so normally you go to the small airport, take a little puddle jumper, takes you about an hour. You get to Panama City and then you fly back. Well, they closed down all flights. So we had to basically find a way to get from Boquete to Panama City. And so we hired a guy, and he basically had exemption from this rule and was able to drive us to Panama City, and we took the flight back and we were good to go. And the problem was they didn't reopen the borders for a long time. And so we really thought we weren't going to be able to come back. We thought we would just have to work with our neighbors, see if they could ship some of our stuff and go from there. But then finally they said, okay, October 12th, we're reopening. So we got lucky and we're able to come back. So as far as preparing for the worst, I don't think this was something you could really prepare for. I think, we just had to kind of break it down piece by piece and figure out what's actually going to work for us, what will be the best for our family. And that's all you can do.
So something you mentioned there, well, you at least alluded to it, was healthcare. And that's obviously one of the biggest concerns that we hear in the FI community. What am I going to do for healthcare once I lose it from my employer? And I'd love to hear about your personal experience with the healthcare system in Panama. Like, do you get it, as a resident, if you live there? Do you need citizenship? Do you pay a lot, a little? How does that all work?
Okay, that's fair. What do you mean? I thought healthcare is good in the U.S. Didn't they fix that? Is that's still going on?
Not yet.
No, I swear, as I read stuff more and more, I always end up, like, people ask me different questions and I'll go, and then, like, everywhere else in the world, except for the U.S., this is how they do things. And it's not just healthcare, everything. It's kind of weird that the U.S. is still backwards on certain points like this. But healthcare, yeah, that's the big one. We all know that. So no, they do not have healthcare if you're a citizen, as far as I know here, or a resident or anything. Mind you, we are not residents. We're tourists here. We did not get our residency here. And we could talk about that more if you want to. But as far as healthcare goes, so we bought expat insurance, and that basically means you got to be out of the country for 6 months outside of your home country. So outside of the U.S. for 6 months out of the year in order to be able to use it. But the reason we got it was not for Panama. We got it for when we travel back to the U.S. or if we're on a vacation somewhere or whatever, we're fully covered then. We don't have to worry about anything. Here, it's really good. The healthcare is very good. The doctors are trained in the U.S. They're trained in France. They're trained in Mexico. But and the facilities are not what you'd expect. They're not. Well, maybe you would expect it, but they're not going to be like what you'd expect from the U.S., where you have these fancy buildings and everything. I mean, they're nice. They're all right. Doctors aren't driving Lexuses and all those kind of things. I mean, it's very good. I wanted to do a test run. And so what I did is, and I didn't want it to be when I was dying or something. So I went to a dermatologist. I had a couple moles I wanted removed, and I was like, you know what, this will be a good opportunity to figure this out. So yeah, I mean, it's cheesy, but I was like, I just want to know how things flow. So I'll feel more comfortable if something happens. So I ended up making an appointment. The major hospitals are in David, like I said, which is about 45 minutes to an hour away from here. And I took a bus down there. And I'll tell you this: I made my appointment, which was my Spanish was horrible at the time, and they only spoke Spanish there. So making that appointment was very interesting. It was about 10 minutes of us trying to figure out what each other were trying to do. But it was funny. All she cared about was my name and getting the date right. Once we had that, we got down there, and they didn't know what I was even going there for, which I thought was interesting. So I got there, and I was told that they're always late, so be prepared for that, and that's fine. And I'm always early, so that doesn't work out very well here. But I ended up getting there because I didn't know where I was going, so I got there about 2:15 for a 3:00 appointment, and I walked in, and it was a big waiting room for the entire floor instead of just for like one doctor's office. It was for the entire floor. So I walked over, and she got my name and all that and had me sit down. And then she came over. So here's what she cared about. She wanted my name. She wanted my email address so they can send you a copy of the receipt or email you if they needed to. Phone number. And do you have insurance? And we did, but I didn't want to deal with that because I wanted to see how this was going to go. So I said no. Now, imagine saying no in the U.S. if they ask you if you have insurance. It's not going to go well. She went, okay, great. Have a seat. So sat down. That was it. 3:00 on the money. Got called in. Talked to this dermatologist. This is the best dermatologist I have ever gone to in my entire life. She took her time. She spoke English, and I knew that going into this. That was part of the reason why I went through her. But she took her time. I mean, she examined every mole on me, every mark, and took pictures and everything. And with her cell phone, by the way, which I thought was kind of freaky. But I found out that's okay later. That made me a little nervous. But they showed up on the computer screen in her office later, and I was like, okay, so that's legit. She doesn't have some weird fetish or something where she takes pictures of people's moles. But anyway, so she told me everything. She goes, okay, well, the one you have, she goes, I'm telling you, it's cosmetic, so you don't need to get it removed. You know, we'll still send out for a biopsy and all that kind of stuff. But she goes, it's going to be cosmetic. And if you want it, she goes, I don't recommend you get it removed. There's no reason to do that. But anyway, so she broke it down. She wasn't trying to make a quick buck or anything like that. And so we were all good. And she said, and I said, yeah, I want to get it done. And she goes, okay, well, that one we'll have to cut out. It's not one we could just freeze off or anything like that. So we'll have to actually schedule it. And I said, okay. And we scheduled it. And when you leave from there, you pay right at the time. And it was $120, $140 for the whole visit. And that includes the biopsy, the whole thing. So yeah. And I didn't end up doing the follow-up. I didn't need to. That's a whole nother story you probably don't want to hear about. But regardless, that was it. You pay on your way out. It's not like months later you get some weird bill and you're like, I don't even understand what this is. There's none of that. That was it. You pay cash, credit card, and you walk out and you're done. That's it. Can't complain. And my understanding is a lot of first notch equipment there. A lot of the stuff that might even be better than the U.S. in certain things. I've heard stories. I haven't actually seen that, but so even though when you think of third world countries and you think of, oh, this is going to be a train wreck, it's not. I think, sometimes we kind of have our blinders on in the States and just kind of think we're the best. But there's other places that have some strong arguments as to why it might not be the best in certain areas.
Well, it seems like you're really starting to figure out all the systems, get really comfortable there. I mean, now you've been there a couple years. I guess what I'm thinking through, though, is I imagine when you moved there, part of the appeal is it almost felt like this big vacation. Yes, it's cheaper, but it's a different location. It's probably maybe even a little more scenic than Ohio. I don't want to make any, rash judgments there. But now that you've been living there for a couple years, do you think it's starting to feel less like a vacation? And do you have your eyes on a different location for like a geoarbitrage? Are you really comfortable with Panama?
Oh, that's good. So when we first came here, it was interesting overall because it was an overhaul. You got to remember, I went from working full time to being retired. We moved we sold off everything we owned, moved to a foreign country, took our daughter out of school to start homeschooling her. So it was just crazy. I mean, everything about it was crazy. But when we got here, there was a lot of, we got to find our footing. We got to just kind of find the right pace, the right routine for us and everything. And, at the beginning, I'd say there was some we went whale watching. We did all kinds of fun stuff like that, but not too much has changed. Now we kind of have a rhythm, but we still are doing we're getting up tomorrow. We're going hiking. We'll do the homeschooling a little bit later in the day. Faith, our daughter, she's gonna write a report based on where we're going. Like it's a field trip. We're still having that fun. But yes, like you're talking about, when you go on vacation, you're not doing laundry. You're not paying your bills. Your mind's elsewhere. But here, no, life goes on. You still got to do that stuff. I love it here. I love it that it's 75 degrees. We did that on purpose. The beach life is something everybody dreams about, but I don't want to live in 85 degree weather. I want to be able to walk around outside without melting. I don't want to live in air conditioning. Here there's no heat or air conditioning. I mean, you just open the windows and that's it. It's beautiful all the time. So you have that good part, but then on the flip side, we're missing out on friends and family. And I think it's a little tough with Faith because we got an older community here for the most part. I mean, this is mostly, expat retirees here. And so she doesn't have like a ton of friends. She's made some friends and, so have we and stuff, but it's not like, hey, go ahead outside and just play with your neighbors here. Our neighbors are like 84 years old. So the point being there's not like a lot of kids. So we have to like schedule to go, okay, let's call your friend's parents. We'll see if we can arrange something and then we'll drive you to their house or vice versa and everything. So there's a lot of planning. There's not a ton of activities for her. So right now we're kind of in that conundrum of trying to figure out, do we stay or do we go? We will stay here till at least August of 2021. And that's when our lease runs out. And at that point, it's kind of a good opportunity because if we decide to go back to the U.S., we can put her back in a school if we wanted to. It's around that time. We might continue to homeschool. If we do go to the U.S., do we go to a different state? Are we like, I hate winter. I hate it. I don't know. But it is what it is. So, but that's where family is. That's where the friends are. We've made friends here, but it's tough because it's not the friends you grew up with. And I mean, we have great times talking with people, but it's not oh my gosh, do you remember 10 years ago when you did this? And like you don't have that bond of just knowing each other so well. And that's tough. That's real tough. But, so we're going back and forth trying to decide. I don't think we'd go to a separate country right now. If we leave here, this is all if we leave Panama. But if we leave, I don't think we'd go to another country right now. And the reason for that is Faith, because everything that we're doing, she's the prime directive. We have to figure out what is going to be best for her. And so far, this has been best for her. I mean, this is an opportunity that most kids will never experience. But she's, but we, and she loves it. She'd stay here forever. She's told us a million times, and she's fine. She doesn't even care about hanging out with other kids. She'll sit with she's one of those kids that just sits with the grownups and good to go. But we're like, but is that best for her? And that's kind of where we're at right now. So it's a big decision on what we're going to do. And we don't have an answer for that yet.
So you kind of mentioned that at least August 2021. I mean, I'm just kind of curious. And you also said that you were just a tourist. You're not, of citizenship or residency. And it doesn't sound like you're going for either of those. But I'd love if we could at least touch on that. It sounds like it's kind of just like tourist at will. Can you just stay there for, a year on end with no repercussions?
No, but it's pretty loose as far as what the stipulations are. So in a nutshell, as a tourist, you can come here and you can stay here for up to 6 months, and then you have to leave the country for 30 days. So that doesn't mean you have to go back to the U.S. I mean, if you're retired like I am, you could go to St. Martin and stay there for a couple of weeks and then go to the Bahamas. I mean, you can do different things. And we've done that. We went back to the US for a few weeks the one time, and then, followed up with a cruise before we headed back and different things like that. But where they get you is if you have a vehicle, your US driver's license is only good for 90 days at a time here. And you want to know why that is?
Yes.
Yeah, so do I. I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. It's Panama. You can't have everything perfect here. That's the way it goes. So for us, that's not a big deal. But for a lot of folks, that would be a pretty big wrench in the works that you'd have to leave every 3 months. And the days of border hopping where you just go over to Costa Rica for, a day or two, stay at a hotel and come back are pretty much done. They've been cracking down on that. So you don't see much of that anymore. For us, that wasn't a big deal because part of what we built in was travel. We do a lot with travel rewards, so we're not paying a ton, but we want to fly back and see friends and family often, and we have that ability, so why not do it? So that hasn't been a big deal for us. As far as getting residency here goes, it's very easy to get I got to be careful how I say that. It's not easy. Everything takes forever here. But it's not hard to actually get what you need to make it happen. The biggest thing for us though, is it would be pricey for the three of us. We're guessing about $7,500 for attorney fees and all the whatnots that you have to do to make it happen for the Friendly Nations visa, which is it pretty easy for anybody to obtain that one. So that's not the end of the world, $7,500. But our thing was, well, we don't want to do that right. What if we just got that right off the rip and we hate it here, and now we just dropped $7,500? Are we going to feel guilty, like we have to stay because we spent that money or whatever? So the plan was to wait, and once we decide, if we decide we're going to stay here, then yes, we'll get residency. But for the time being, being what do they call it, a perpetual tourist isn't the end of the world. It's been working pretty well for us.
And are there any other perks that you know of in Panama for having residency other than just not having the annoyance of having to leave every 6 months?
The Friendly Nations visa gives you the opportunity, you can get a work permit, and so you'd be able to do work here. And that means so I make some income from my blog, a little, not much, but I make a little bit from the blog and different things like that. And that's okay. But once you decide you want to sell products or services in Panama, then you need a work permit. And even that said, there's certain protected jobs you cannot get as a foreigner. Even if you have residency here, you can't become a doctor or a nurse or a lawyer. Those are protected jobs that only Panamanians can have. So that's really the only one that comes to mind for me for that visa. However, they have something called the pensionado visa, and it's more directed for retirees, which I am, but it's more directed at traditional retirees in that you have to be a certain age to get some of the benefits. Maybe I should separate this out. They have a thing called Jubilee discounts. And what that basically means is, you get giant percentages off travel, at restaurants, doctors, everything. I mean, it is like the AAA card on steroids and stuff. So, but you have to be, and I can't remember, and it's a different age for men and women, but let's say, I'm going to be wrong about this, but let's say it's like 65 for men and 55 for women or something like that. So that's fantastic. You can wait and you automatically get that as a resident, even with the Friendly Nations visa. But if you get this pensionado visa, then you get that regardless. And so we looked at that, and it's cheaper to get that visa. But the problem is you have to show, let's see if I can get these numbers right. I think it's $1,200 per month in guaranteed income. And what they're talking, so, we have a high net worth. I definitely can't complain, especially with the market. Definitely can't complain about that right now. But they don't look at that. They want to know you have Social Security coming in or a pension, that kind of guaranteed income. I don't even think annuities count anymore. So we're not able to get that visa. And so the only way we can get that perk, which, hey, if you're able to get that guaranteed income, by all means, that's the way to go. That's kind of cool. That makes travel so much. I mean, you're saving, I think it's like 30% off flights and everything. So it's the way to go. But yeah, as far as benefits go, that's what we're looking at.
Sweet. Well, I have definitely learned a ton about Panama and travel and your story today, Jim. And you have, so much content on your blog too. You're definitely a super prolific writer, which is cool for people who want to follow along and learn more about what you're doing. But so where are the best places where people can follow along, get in contact with you, share the journey? They should
come down here and visit me personally, knock on my door. Or if you don't want to do that, you can go to route2retire.com is my blog. And I am Route to Retire everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, whatever else is. Anything else out there? Any new ones? What are you young whippersnappers using these days?
You got TikTok, Jim?
Yeah, you got Snapchat, TikTok? No, none of those.
Well, thank you, Jim, for giving us those resources. And I think I'll be taking you up on both offers to come down in person once things clear up travel-wise, and as well as checking out the blog a lot more. It's been a ton of great information. I know as we put together all these resources for geoarbitrage, this is going to be a great one for our listeners. So thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Very much appreciated.
And as always, if you want to check out our Facebook group page, you can do so at thefishow.com/community. And we always appreciate those 5-star reviews. They help us get great guests like we had today. And if you're interested in supporting The Fi Show, you can do so by checking out some of our partners over at the resources page, which can be found at thefishow.com/resources. And thanks for listening.